I didn't have a single parent. I had two parents, but one of them was an alcoholic and one of them was really into church. And so it was a strange dichotomy.
That's a lot of trauma. Church and alcoholism is a lot of trauma.
It's like, how does this work? And my aversion to religion actually is stronger than my aversion to alcohol, because my father wasn't violent, or he didn't express his alcoholism in rage or anything like that. He just didn't get very far in life, and so that is the extent, really. And he was very quiet and subservient to my mom, because she was really loud and very religious. And so I always thought that they had a strange relationship. I didn't understand. Well, I shouldn't say I didn't understand, because I really didn't know then. But as I look back on it now as an adult, I don't understand their relationship. And that's probably because my relationship with my husband was more equal in that regard. He wasn't a typical man. I didn't do the dishes, he did the dishes. My son-in-law is the same way. And so it's strange to think about that and not be affected by it. I find it very curious that my aversion to religion is stronger than my aversion to alcohol.
Well, I think that makes sense, especially in your case, but I do want to just go on record as saying the church is very traumatizing.
Yeah.
I mean, not always. I know some people have good experiences with church, but man, talk about the patriarchy. I mean, like, the church is really the major engine for the patriarchy. So for women, I think it can be incredibly traumatizing in that way. But also, you know, if you're queer, it's incredibly traumatizing, or it can be. I think the feeling of being judged, not just by all the people around you all the time, but also that the supreme being who made you and loves you is constantly watching you and judging every tiny thing you do. That actually
somebody watching me all the time.
Writing down everything you do and then deciding whether or not you live into eternity or you burn in the pits of hell. Right? Like that is mental health trauma. That's really traumatizing.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you say that, because it's very true. Most religions, in fact, pretty much all of them that I can think of, while many of them are letting women hold the priesthood now, but how many centuries did it take for them to be equals?
And I will say, and I don't know why this didn't get more press, but the Catholic Church, for example, as we all know, recently the Catholic Church has had, scandal after scandal, sexual assault scandal after scandal, pedophilia, rape. It's just been awful. In order to sort of appease the public, they created, and I'm going to butcher this a little bit because I'm not Catholic and so I don't know what the technical terms are, but they created a law within the church that any clergy member who is caught, molesting a child or having an inappropriate sexual relationship will lose their derobed, I think it's called, or something, decloaked. Essentially, they'll lose their ability to be a whatever they were, right? Defrocked, maybe.
Yeah.
As they did this, so this is 2021, maybe 2020. As they did this, at the exact same time, they created another law that said that if any woman in the church tries to assume a position of authority within the church, or if anyone who is not a woman tries to help her achieve that end in any way, they will both be banished from the church. And this is like
What?
last year. Yeah. So, so I just want to point out that in their minds, it is just as evil to rape a child in the Catholic Church as it is to allow a woman to ascend in power. And that's not hundreds of years ago. That's not the Salem witch trials. That's right now. And so I think we do really need to think about the ways that the church traumatizes people. I think that's something, and also because the church has a lot of power, money, right? They have an audience. They have the power over how people think, right? They have the ability to frame people's minds and thoughts. And they are so, it is generally speaking, across the board, churches are so anti-women in these different ways. And so, and they're creating our culture, right? They really are through who they fund, the politicians that they fund. Like I said, speaking to audiences. So I do really, to your point, I think it makes a lot of sense that you would feel really fucking traumatized by the church.
So have women that have responded to you talked about that?
About the church?
Uh-huh.
I've had people talk to me about the church. We haven't done an episode on the church yet, though, and I think it is really something that needs to be talked about. Part of the podcast structure is I talk about my experience on the topic for a while as sort of a storytelling moment. And one thing that I feel very grateful for is that my mom tried to get us to go to church, but we would ditch Sunday school. And when my mom figured it out, she stopped making us go. So I luckily was spared a lot of that. But part of the reason, what's interesting, and this is just an aside, part of the reason that I would ditch was because I felt so uncomfortable in Sunday school. Partly because a man really fucking sketched me out. He was like, I know you, I know your family, remember we did this fun thing together? And it felt very much like, in retrospect, when I look back on it, I think I was being groomed. And I just stopped. My mom would sort of drop us off, and my sister and I would just sneak away and go to the park. But yeah, I mean, yeah. So it would be a great topic to cover. So
I'm taking it that unfortunately you have no shortage of topics to cover on the Patrauma Party on the podcast.
Well, it's funny you say that because when I first started it, I was like, man, I don't know how long I can do this because like how many topics are there? And as I got going, not just my own ideas, but I started accumulating more and more ideas, but also listeners would reach out to me and be like, oh, can you cover this? Can you talk about this? Can we do this? And so now I have a very long list of topics to cover, and yeah, there's a lot.
And I guess before we wrap this up, I really want to stress that many things that are happening, you believe, comes from trauma in somebody's life. And it could be something from their child or from their teenage years, or even an adult in adulthood.
Oh yeah, I mean, you can be traumatized at any point in your life, right? Yeah, I think that we are genuinely that it is the air we breathe and it is the water we swim in, and that so often in our lives, especially in the United States, where we have adages like pick yourself up by your own bootstraps, right? And these kinds of, this mentality that you have to do everything alone, you can't ask for help, and that it's sort of, we live in this sort of fiercely independent culture that really fucks with us, right? Because we don't we don't feel like we have a right to heal, because there's only so much healing you can do alone. You need community, you need, like for me, I just think that like a mental health professional, a therapist, or a coach who's trained with trauma, like it's imperative. And yeah, I do. I think.
Let me interrupt. A coach, by coach you mean life coach?
Yeah, like a life coach. Yeah, and there are some great coaches out there who work specifically with trauma and looking at how is trauma preventing you from going after your professional dreams? How is trauma preventing you from dating? How is trauma preventing you from leaving this job that you hate, or from having that conversation with the family member, or whatever it is, right? Because it leaks, when we're traumatized, it leaks into every area of our lives. It's not like, oh, I was traumatized in this one very specific way and that's the only way it'll ever show up for me again. If you learned not to trust early on because of a rageful parent, you're not going to trust in the workplace, you're not going to trust in your romantic relationships, in your platonic relationships, in your family, right? Like, it's going to go everywhere. So, yeah, and I think when you pull back and you look at, this is something we talked about last time, was like, you look at someone like Putin, who is just this maniacal dictator, aggressively trying to bring the Ukraine, right, whatever, and just like violating all these people and all of these written agreements. Think about what happens in a person's life that leads them to that, and how many other people around get hurt when someone is traumatized, right? Like, it's not just you, it's all the people around you.
Right, yeah.
So that's another reason why I wanted to do this podcast. I just believe so firmly in destigmatizing mental health. I think it's something we're all working with. I think we all go through depressions. I think we all grieve. I think we all feel rage. I think we all feel insecure at times. You know, I think we all wonder if we're good enough. And no one's talking about it. Well, I shouldn't say no one. It's become more popular to talk about. But I know from someone who came out of like a relatively corporate job, my experience was exude success to become successful, and that's really hard when you've been traumatized, and it's very alienating, very isolating, and certainly doesn't help with the healing process. So, you know, the whole point of this podcast is just to make people feel like you are not alone. This is really common, and what do we do about it? Like, it's like I say, it's not a place to bitch, although bitching is fine, but it's also a place to get some actual healing tools. How do we work through this? What does it look like to heal?
What's the next step?
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. And before we go, tell people how to get to your podcast.
Sure. So it's called the Patrauma Party, Patrauma. It's on just about every platform. You can find me on Insta at the Patrauma Party. Yes, at the Patrauma Party, or you can find my personal Insta at Remy's, REMEEZ, and you can also email me at patraumaparty@gmail.com.
And I found it using Ecosia, the search engine.
Oh, great.
I just wanted to check that out, so I just put in the Patrauma Party, and it came right up.
Great.
It came right up, so.
Great.
Well, thank you again for
My
sitting
pleasure.
down with us, Remy. I really appreciate talking about that. If you have trauma that you've experienced, please tune into that podcast, or get in touch with Remy. Give it one more time. You're contacting you directly.
Yeah, you can email me at patraumaparty@gmail.com. You can find me on Insta at Remy's, or the Patrauma Party on Insta as well.
Well, thank you. Have a great day. Thanks for tuning in to Catching Serendipity. Cool.
Thanks, Talene.
You're welcome.